killer.
What's up, slackers? Welcome to Book Cheats. Today we'll be talking about The Great Gatsby Chapter 8. Today's feature tie is red. Let's get right into the chapter. So this chapter takes place right after the events of the past night. Nick is in bed and he can't sleep. Early in the morning, he hears a car pull into Gatsby's driveway and he gets out of bed to meet with Gatsby. Gatsby tells Nick that he stayed at Daisy's house all night to watch over her to make sure that Tom didn't hurt her. Nick tries to convince Gatsby to leave because his car was the car who hit Myrtle, and he tells Gatsby that the police will eventually find him. But Nick knew if Gatsby had any chance of staying with Daisy, he wouldn't leave until he was absolutely certain that Daisy didn't want to be with him. As Nick and Gatsby are lounging in chairs behind Gatsby's house, Gatsby can't stop talking about Daisy. Nick also mentions this is when Gatsby told him about his past history and the truth about his upbringing. Gatsby goes into detail about how he and Daisy met. He went over to Daisy's house when he was in the military and he was an officer. Gatsby couldn't believe that Daisy lived in such a nice house and was completely intimidated by her. Gatsby, being the con artist type, started to use his con artist skills to try to act like he was rich too. Gatsby was really surprised that he fell in love with Daisy because he had never been in love with anybody before. He almost hoped that she would dump him just because he felt like it was a dream. But Daisy loved Gatsby too. Gatsby tells Nick that the night that he left for war, he and Daisy cuddled all night and left each other with a great memory to part ways with. When Gatsby got into the military, even before he hit the front lines, he was a captain. After all the events of the war had happened, there was some confusion between Gatsby and the military sent Gatsby to Oxford instead of to his hometown, like he had asked them. Daisy had started to sort of lose hope in them and started to go on dates. That's when Tom Buchanan came around. Daisy was flattered that such a high-class person wanted to be with her. And just from her logical thinking, and because of his wealth, Daisy married Tom. Gatsby found out about their marriage while he was at Oxford. The sun was starting to rise, and Gatsby tells Nick that he thinks that Daisy never loved Tom. Gatsby says that he feels that Tom sort of pressured Daisy into admitting that she used to love him. Nick sort of feels sorry for Gatsby because he's sort of delusional on this point because Daisy did love Tom. Gatsby continues his story about his past. He says that when he got back from the war, he skipped picking up his military check just to see Daisy. When he got to his hometown, Daisy and Tom were on their honeymoon.
Right, this is fine, right? Sir? It's totally fine.
It was 9 o'clock and one of the butlers came outside to drain the pool. Gatsby told him to stop, and he said to Nick that he hadn't even swum in his pool all season. Nick needed to go to work, but he didn't want to leave Gatsby because he really sympathized with him. Nick tries to stay and support his buddy, and he ends up missing 2 trains into town, but by the 3rd one he knew he had to leave. As Nick heads out, he tells Gatsby that he'll call him around noon. Gatsby asks Nick if he thinks that Daisy will actually call. Nick lies to him and says that he thinks she will. As Nick starts to head to work, he stops and turns and says to Gatsby, "They're a rotten crowd, you're worth the whole damn bunch put together." Basically, he was telling Gatsby that he thinks Gatsby is an amazing person. Nick says that this was the only compliment he had ever given Gatsby, and he's glad that he said it. He could tell that this made Gatsby really happy because he was really filled with light. Nick goes to work and falls asleep at his desk. After a few hours, the phone rings and wakes him up. It was Jordan Baker. Jordan would often call Nick while he was at work to let him know where she was at so they could hang out later. Jordan told Nick that she would be in Southampton later that day. Jordan sort of changes her tone, and in a sort of loving manner, she says that Nick is always super nice to her and that she really wants to see him. Nick, sort of reciprocating that love, tells Jordan that he wanted to see her too. But Nick was also feeling super irritated and super stressed out about everything that was happening. And because of the whole situation that was going down, he didn't really want to see Jordan. Jordan kept trying to schedule a time when she and Nick could meet, and Nick kept blowing her off until she got super mad and hung up the phone. Nick then sort of changes the subject and then reflects on what happened after they left that night from the scene of the accident where Myrtle died. Nick says that after the accident, they contacted Myrtle's sister, Catherine. I believe we met her in chapter 2 when she and Nick hung out. When Catherine had arrived at the crime scene, she was completely wasted. She had drunk so much because she was so sad. Michaelius, George's friend who had seen the accident, stays all night with George to comfort him. All night, George rocked back and forth, completely depressed about what had happened to his wife. At around 3 a.m., George's thoughts became more organized, and he started to think who had hit her and driven away. George announces that he knows a way to find out who was driving that yellow car. George says that he thinks the person who hit her with the car was the same person who had punched her in the face a while ago when she came home with bruises. And George pulls out the dog collar that Tom had bought Myrtle and says that he thinks that same person had bought her the dog and was the same person who his wife was cheating on him with. Michaelius during this whole time is trying to comfort him and talk him through it and help him not to be so depressed. Michaelius asks George if he's related to any church. George says that he doesn't have any church. And George changes the subject back to the man who had killed his wife. George says that while they were arguing, she was looking out the window and he thinks that she saw the car of her lover and ran outside and her lover hit her without any regard. George was completely filled with the spirit of revenge. And the author reflects this by again mentioning Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. Morning came and Michaelius finally went home and told George that he'd be back in a little bit. He rests for a little bit and when he came back, George was gone. By 2:30, George knew the person who owned the car who hit his wife. The scene of the book again changes, and Gatsby is in his pool, lounging on a new blow-up mattress he had just purchased. Gatsby had told his butler to bring the phone outside if any call came through. Nick says that he thinks that Gatsby didn't expect any phone call though. He thinks that Gatsby kind of knows that there's no hope for him and Daisy. As the day went on, butlers heard a few gunshots outside and didn't think much of it because people often shot guns at Gatsby's house.
Say hello to my little friend!
Nick came back from work and rushed up to Gatsby's house to talk to him. Nick gets to the house and 4 people see the scene at the same time. Nick, the butler, the chauffeur, and the gardener find Gatsby's body in a small pool of blood floating in the pool. The gardener found George's body a few feet away, lying in the yard. George had shot himself. And that concludes the chapter. Thanks so much for watching Book Cheats. Please leave that like and subscribe. If you have any questions from your homework, leave a comment down below. And I would just like to thank you guys so much for the support lately and all the likes. I'm coming up pretty soon on 1,000 subscribers and super stoked about it. I didn't think a book reading channel could grow so fast, and I just want to thank you guys for the support and liking my videos. I want to keep growing my channel, and you guys are the ones who are helping me out with this, so thank you so much. You guys have a great day and slack on.
Chinchilla.